free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16 and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight.
No.
Today marks 50 years since Margaret Thatcher became the first female leader of a major Western party. Despite facing doubt from all sides, she went on to transform the nation and to win the Cold War. In 2024, the UK allocated a staggering £13.7 billion of your money to foreign aid. Is it time to reconsider and perhaps end our foreign aid commitments? A nurse claims harassment over sharing a changing room with a transgender NHS doctor who argues he's biologically female. The case is fueling even more debate over gender identity in women's spaces. Is the claim against the doctor fair? And a controversial change to the UK's assisted suicide bill proposes replacing High Court judges with a panel of experts to approve cases. Labour MP Kim Ledbetter says it strengthens safeguards, but critics warn it puts vulnerable people at risk. Are we on the slippery slope before the bill has even passed? State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most pugnacious panel, former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and journalist and broadcaster Michael Crick. As ever, it's a crucial part of the programme. Let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Tatiana Sanchez.
Jacob, thank you very much. The top stories this evening. 11 Labour councillors have been suspended from the party as part of its investigation into a WhatsApp group containing offensive messages which saw a former minister sacked and a second MP lose the whip. A Labour spokesperson said swift action will be always taken where individuals are found to have breached the high standards expected of them as Labour Party members. Burnley MP Oliver Ryan was the second MP to be suspended. He has apologised for comments made in the group. He followed Andrew Gwynn, who was also sacked as a health minister. Gerald Cooney, the former Labour leader of Tameside Council, said he raised concerns about Gwynn's remarks several times in the past year. Labour MP Joe White spoke to GB News.
Well, I think they deserve to go. I obviously don't know what they said, but clearly they crossed a line. That WhatsApp group was set up in 29 during the trigger ballot post process.
It's called Trigger Me Timbers.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's why.
Yes, it's a play on words. And so under Jeremy Corbyn, every MP had to go through a trigger ballot process. Andrew Gwynn, I understand, was under threat, and so he tried to set up a group of supporters.
Supporters, friends.
Yes, and so he felt in that environment he could cross the line, and he was holding them in, I believe, this is my interpretation, with jokes and attacks on members of the public.
Trying to get them all jolly along, and that
Yes.
they went too far in what's called banter.
Exactly.
In other news, a National Police Chiefs Council spokesperson says police officers and staff should always be held to the highest standards, and we must ensure that only those who are suitable to wear the uniform enter and remain in policing. The comments come as the High Court ruled the Met Police cannot dismiss officers by removing their vetting clearance. Sergeant Lino de Maria successfully mounted a legal challenge after having his vetting removed over sexual assault allegations, which he denies. He was found to have no case to answer in respect of the allegations and argued that having his vetting removed without the accusations being proved is a breach of his right to a fair trial. Israel's Prime Minister says the Gaza ceasefire will end if Hamas does not return Israeli hostages by midday on Saturday. Benjamin Netanyahu warned of intense fighting if the hostages are not released. His comments echo those of US President Donald Trump, who earlier said the Israel-Hamas ceasefire should be cancelled if hostages held in Gaza are not returned on time. Terror group Hamas announced last night that they'll delay hostage releases planned for Saturday until further notice. And Sir Alex Ferguson led the tributes to Denis Law as the football community paid their final respects, saying he was one of the greatest players ever at Man United. Ferguson, the former Manchester United manager, was in attendance alongside several other United greats, including Ruud van Nistelrooy and Paul Scholes. Well, Denis Law died last month at the age of 84. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More news from me in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. Today marks 50 years since Margaret Thatcher became leader of the Conservative Party, the first female leader of a major political party in the Western world. When she became the Tory leader in February 1975, few could have predicted the fundamental impact she would have not just on Britain, but on the world stage. Going on to win 3 consecutive general elections, she was a revolutionary force who embodied conviction politics at its finest. As she famously declared, "I'm not a consensus politician, I am a conviction politician." Margaret Thatcher's journey to the top was anything but easy and happened in spite of widespread scepticism, even from her own beloved husband, Denis, who muttered, "Heath will murder you." But the then Mrs Thatcher was never one to back down from a challenge. She thrived on debate and dissent, stating with characteristic confidence, "I love argument, I love debate. I don't expect anyone just to sit there and agree with me. That's not their job." In the eyes of many, it was her refusal to conform that made her such a formidable force. Her premiership, beginning in 1979, was marked by groundbreaking policies that changed the face of the United Kingdom. From the sale of council houses to privatisation to a crackdown on the trade unions, she reshaped the economy and society, waging a lifelong battle against the evils of socialism.
And socialist governments traditionally do make a financial mess. They always run out of other people's money. It's quite a characteristic of them.
Exactly what's happening now. Her belief in rolling back the frontiers of the state epitomised her economic philosophy. And when the pressure mounted, as they did in 1980 with soaring unemployment, she famously stood her ground.
To those waiting with bated breath for that favourite media catchphrase, the U-turn, I have only one thing to say. U-turn if you want to. The ladies not for turning.
That moment became one of the defining quotations of her career. On the global stage, she found a kindred spirit in US President Ronald Reagan. Together, they championed the fight against communism, cementing the special relationship between the UK and the US. The Soviets dubbed her the Iron Lady, a nickname she wore with pride.
I stand before you tonight in my red star chiffon evening gown, my face softly made up and my fair hair gently waved. The Iron Lady of the Western world.
Her legacy in the United States has not gone amiss. Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley invoked the spirit of Lady Thatcher in a 2023 primary debate.
This is exactly why Margaret Thatcher said, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman.
Well, I'm not sure I'd go that far, but two pivotal events defined her time as Prime Minister. The Falklands War in 1982 and the miners' strike of 1984-85. Victory in the Falklands demonstrated her decisive leadership, while her handling of the miners' strike highlighted her fierce commitment to economic reform. We always have to be aware of the enemy within, which is much more difficult to fight and more dangerous to liberty. But Thatcher was more than just a tough politician. She had a philosophical side too, quoting St. Francis of Assisi upon her 1979 election victory.
Where there is discord, may we bring harmony. Where there is error, may we bring truth. Where there is doubt, may we bring faith. And where there is despair, may we bring hope.
Well, she certainly brought a lot of hope, and her impact extended beyond economics and politics. She shattered glass ceilings, became the first female Prime Minister in British history, despite once rather modestly saying this.
I don't think that there will be a woman Prime Minister in my lifetime. And I don't think it depends on so much whether it's a man Prime Minister or a woman Prime Minister, as whether that person is the right person for the job.
Well, she was certainly the right person for the job, and she did something to herself few could ever achieve. She proved she was wrong. Her understanding of the challenges women faced was clear when she remarked, "Any woman who understands the problems of running a home will be nearer to understanding the problems of running a country." Her departure from office in 1990 was dramatic, the culmination of cabinet betrayals that she described as treachery with a smile on its face. Yet even after leaving Number 10, she remained a towering figure in British and global politics. Leaders from across the political spectrum, including Labour's Gordon Brown, admired her conviction. Mr Brown commissioned a portrait of her, acknowledging her role in bringing meaningful change to the UK, one which the Reverend Starmer famously had removed after taking office last year. Margaret Thatcher was a leader who embodied strength, determination and vision. She knew what the people she represented wanted and how to give it to them. She defined them as her people, and she stood for those who worked hard and sought to better themselves as she had done. She was ideological because her ideology worked, and she clearly saw the failure of airy-fairy socialism. It was this pragmatic approach that defined her legacy. There's no denying Margaret Thatcher's impact was monumental and left an indelible mark on history. At the end of her period in office, the nation was richer, stronger and the victor in the Cold War. The Iron Lady forged a path that reshaped Britain and left an indelible mark on our history. And as we reflect on her remarkable journey, we're reminded of her simple yet powerful declaration, "I fight on, I fight to win." As ever, let me know your views via mailmog at gbnews.com. But I'm now joined by the former First Minister of Northern Ireland, Baroness Foster, and my pugnacious panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and journalist and broadcaster Michael Crick. Arlene, from a Northern Ireland perspective, how important and reassuring it was that you had this figure who was so determined and courageous that even after the IRA almost killed her, she remained committed to the United Kingdom.
Well, I suppose there's two elements to that. I mean, personally for me, when she was elected in 1979, I was 9 years of age, and she was the Prime Minister then until I was nearly 20. So from that perspective, having a woman as Prime Minister was normal. And for a young girl living in the west of Northern Ireland, that was a very, very powerful thing, and it meant it was very inspirational, and it meant that girls could do anything. From the point of view of Northern Ireland, she was strong in IRA terrorism in terms of the hunger strike, as you will remember. And, of course, she wouldn't move away from the fact that she was treating them as criminals, which, of course, they were. But, of course, the great letdown for us as unionists was the Anglo-Irish Agreement. And if you read Charles Moore's brilliant book on Thatcher, he says that she was advised that in this way she would get more security cooperation from the Republic of Ireland, more extradition, because at that time there was no extradition happening in terms of criminals in the Republic of Ireland. And that didn't happen, unfortunately. And I think in later years she came to regret the fact that she had ceded what she ceded in the Anglo-Irish Agreement. But so for Unionists in Northern Ireland, there's a mixed heritage, if I can put it that way.
OK, she was very clear on terrorism.
Yeah, she was.
But she was willing to deal with the Republic of Ireland in a way that
willing
didn't
to sign
actually
the
work.
Anglo-Irish Agreement, which she thought she would get security cooperation out of, and unfortunately she didn't.
But as an inspiration to you, obviously, you became First Leader in Northern Ireland yourself and First Minister. And as a woman, did you feel that she opened up those doors, or it was just natural to you because, as you say, she was Prime Minister during your formative years?
Well, and I think that was very important for me to get involved in politics, because in Northern Ireland during the 80s it wasn't a very pleasant place to be in politics, and it was quite dangerous. But because she was Prime Minister, it sent a very strong message that women should and could be involved in politics, and I thought that was very strong. Of course, she said she wasn't a feminist because at that time feminists were of a particular ilk. But I think she did a lot for female participation in politics. Many would decry that. I don't, because I'm from right of centre as well, and I seen her someone who stepped forward and was willing to go toe-to-toe with men on her own terms.
And stylistically, she was always very forceful and clear. Do you think that was the right style to have, or she could have achieved more had she been more emollient?
Well, you see, I think that's hindsight, isn't it? Because at the time when she became leader of the party, everybody thought, oh goodness, this is an accidental happening. It shouldn't really have happened. We should really have one of our own. We should really have a man in the position of leadership here. What has happened? And she had to be strong. She had to tell them that she was going to do as good as any man. And I mean, the men were the, if you like, the barometer of good leadership. So she had to prove that she could be as good as any man. And she did, of course.
And she did. Mike, let me bring you in, because the left, the hard left, was basically destroyed by Margaret Thatcher, wasn't it? That the Labour Party had to reform itself and eventually become Blairite as a consequence of Margaret Thatcher's changes.
Indeed, and much of what Blair stood for was Thatcherite. You know, he has acknowledged his debt to Thatcher in that way, although, of course, the left were to return later under Corbyn. I mean, one of the points I would make in response to Arlene is that, of course, she was she was a model in the sense that she was Prime Minister, and of course all the devolved assemblies have had female leaders at one point or another, and we've had 2 other female Prime Ministers, and pioneered in that way. But actually she had hardly any other... She was very bad at promoting women herself. I think there were only 2 women in her cabinet, and Baroness Young, and I forget who the other one was, in the whole...
Shepherd.
Sorry?
Gillian Shepherd was there as well.
Right,
I think she was there.
Yeah, in the whole 11 years. And you would have thought she would have done better. I don't know why that was, but it was a failing from the point of view, of all of us, that she didn't bring women on more in that way. And indeed, the same with MPs and candidates.
Kelvin, the Sun was a great cheerleader for her. What made Sun readers like her so much? What did they feel was her greatest achievement as Prime Minister?
Well, remember, we came out of the 70s. The 70s was a socialist nightmare. And when you came to... We wanted some sunshine. I don't think you can ever underplay the sale of council houses, because I think not only did it actually put money in people's pockets, fantastic, and put a home in their ambition, which may not have happened, but it also, in an odd way, I think, created a sense of what conservatism could do that socialism couldn't do. And I absolutely love the fact that Labour are going back on all this, right? Because what it means is they're going to be slung out in 2029 in a massive, massive revolution coming from ordinary people. And honestly, it was a fantastic moment. Honestly, I left for America in the late 70s because I couldn't take any more of it. My family couldn't take any more of it. And actually, the 80s turned out to be an explosively good time. And I put it down to her, and the fact that we're still discussing it now, right, decades after Mrs. Thatcher has died, goes to show that there isn't anybody quite like it. And the issue that you were getting from the States is a sense of, mad optimism. In the UK, we did have optimism. Right now, under Labour, there is nothing but pessimism. I've never seen a collapse like this.
She would have been horrified by Trump. She would have been horrified by Boris Johnson and Liz Truss.
No,
she would have been horrified by
Boris. She'd been horrified by Boris. I don't agree about Trump.
All right, well, I give you because she would have. I mean, she was a free marketeer. She believed in free trade.
I want to give Arlene the last word. What do you think were the best and worst things Margaret Thatcher did as Prime Minister?
Well, obviously the Anglo-Irish Agreement is the worst thing that she did from my perspective. I do agree with Kelvin. I think the home ownership piece right across the UK was so empowering to so many people who otherwise wouldn't have been able to own their own home and pass it on then through their children in the way that she allowed them to do. And, you know, it is true, and Michael is right about this. She didn't empower other women because she didn't see it as her job to do that. She saw her job as running the country and getting the best people for the job. If there were men, there were men. She wasn't going to waste time looking around and giving tools to people. Obviously, nowadays, we want to empower women and we want more women to come into politics. And then we look behind and we say, how can we help you become involved in politics? That wasn't what she was interested in. She was interested in running the country.
I'm going to give you a one-word answer each. Is Kemi Badenoch the new Margaret Thatcher? Kelvin?
Definitely not, 100%.
Michael?
No.
Arlene?
She could be.
She could be. Some optimism there. Thank you, Arlene. And my panel. After the break, in 2024, the UK allocated a staggering £13.7 billion of your money to foreign aid. Is it time to reconsider and perhaps end our foreign aid commitment?
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
According to a report from the RAC, many drivers see speed limits as a target rather than anything else. More than 50% of us think it's acceptable to break the speed limit.
So this morning we're asking, is it time to increase the motorway speed limit?
Let's talk to automotive journalists Danny Kelly and Steve Fowler. Gents, what a pleasure to speak to you both in one go.
I think we should join many countries in the European Union that have 130 kilometres speed limit, which is around about 81 miles an hour. I drive to London on a weekly basis, and I think the roads are capable of handling higher speeds. I think unofficially the speed limit, without getting pulled over by the local police at the time, is probably around about 78, 80 miles an hour. If a Bobby's on the motorway doing 70 miles an hour, he wants you to overtake him. He wants the free-flowing of that motorway to continue.
So should we change 70 miles an hour? You know, if people are going 80 miles an hour, just stick to 70 miles an hour as a limit. Yes, you know, it's funny when you're driving along the motorway and there's a police car going at 70 and nobody wants to overtake. But if the average is 80, just leave it at 70.
All the gantries now are fitted with the modern signage where they can change the limit at will. We all know that. It's hard to get up to 70 half the time. So, actually, we could apply those rules, couldn't we, at 80 or even 90 miles an hour and say, well, if the weather's bad, let's reduce it. If the fog's bad, let's reduce it.
Yeah, unfortunately, and I hate to use this phrase, smart motorways, but they're the ones where you have the adjustable limits. They don't cover all of the motorway network, relatively small amount of the motorway network. It is a limit. You know, it's not a target, as I keep saying to my kids. God, they're bored of me saying that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Headliners on GB News, 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and we were talking about Margaret Thatcher, and the mail mogs have come in. Mark says, the only truly libertarian PM we've had, unlike those that stabbed her in the back, and she was tough and stood by her word. Paul says, Lady Thatcher would be horrified at what happened to the Conservative Party in the country. We substituted heirs to Blair as PMs instead of Conservatives like her, and now look at us and the country. Margaret says, how good to have a mail mog from a Margaret. Margaret Thatcher was a brilliant leader. Her rise to Prime Minister did so much for the country, and I can say helped my career considerably as I was working in a male-dominated profession. Such a great inspiration to us all.
Okay.
In 2024, the UK allocated a staggering £13.7 billion of your money to foreign aid. While the notion of supporting global development may seem noble, there have been repeated concerns about the effectiveness of such spending. Today we learn that £15.5 million has been committed to a climate-smart jobs programme in Uganda, with the potential for an extension to £23.25 million. A smaller yet equally egregious example, £50,000, was allocated to study health in Bangladesh. These expenditures force us to ask, is the government entrusted with the hard-earned money of taxpayers truly justified in funding such initiatives abroad, while pressing needs remain on our own shores? Is it time to reconsider, perhaps model ourselves on Donald Trump and cancel the whole thing? Well, I'm joined now by my panel, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin McKenzie, and the journalist and broadcaster, Michael Crick. Trump and Musk have closed down USAID because they found within it so many of those sorts of examples of money being wasted. And isn't that the problem? That it undermines confidence in this type of spending because it goes on shrimp health and climate change jobs.
Well, you talk about shrimp health. I don't know the story of the shrimp health, but it could well be that actually making sure your shrimps are healthy is incredibly important to, was it Bangladesh? Bangladeshi shrimp farmers? I don't know. And if it, what was it, 15 million? Yeah. That seems to me quite a small cost if that is the purpose of it. We should be proud of our foreign aid programme in this country. We are doing so much in so many different places around the world, help with water aid and help eradicate diseases. And if we are keen to, and you keep going on about this is perhaps the one week we're not discussing immigration. One of the reasons why there is so much illegal immigration to this country is people leaving their countries because of failing economies and countries that are affected by climate change. We must do our bit to make people prosper at home and to deal with climate change.
Our bit is actually free trade. What has reduced global poverty massively since 1990 is China and India joining the trading nations. And the trade and the investment that follows trade is much greater than the overseas aid. And the overseas aid has all these problems of favouring dictators who siphon it off, of going to weird and wacky schemes that wouldn't be funded in this country, that gives it a bad name. I'm not against helping people with their health, and with Rotary International and others, polio in India has been massively brought under control. Great steps have been taken. But it's the waste of money on frivolous projects that I object to.
There is waste, and we need to be vigilant about waste, and we need to be vigilant about corruption and stupid schemes. But overall, we should be carrying on, and in fact, we should be increasing our foreign aid budget back to the 0.7% of GDP that it used to be, and was legislated for by the government of which you were a supporter in the Commons.
Hold on, it was a private member's bill. It was a free vote.
You voted against it,
and I tried to filibuster it.
Right. Well, there we are.
So
I'm astonished, really, because for somebody like you, a Christian, you would have thought you'd be a bit more generous in terms of charitable contributions.
But then I think charity is a private matter, not a matter for the state to take money from poor people in this country to give it away.
That's the point, isn't it? I mean, we look at our current economy and we say, can we afford 13 billion to people we don't know and we're not quite sure how that money is to be spent? And my answer to that right now is no. So when this was first brought in, that 0.7 by our unlamented Prime Minister David Cameron, who sent the Tories down a terrible helter-skelter of disaster, which ends up with them being third in the polls tonight at 21%. He was one of the kind of old-fashioned kind of people saying, we've got to do something. Oh, boy. You know, I am not in favour of doing something. I'm in favour of saying, this is what the problem is, and this is where our money goes. And if we stuck $1 billion on that, perhaps that's understandable. Once you get up to 13 billion, you're coming into the area of where your socialist chums are saying, actually, there is a £13 billion hole in the accounts. Why? We should look after our own first and then worry about other people. And we were doing well under Cameron, right? He managed to not do very well for the country. But today, it's a different story. And when the facts change, our attitude towards handing out money should change.
Well, I think we need a bit more compassion and a bit more a lack of selfishness about this. And if we allow global inequalities to grow, the cost will be a lot more than 13 billion in the long term.
We shouldn't worry about inequalities in that sense at all. We should worry about whether everyone's getting richer. Whether there is inequality
well, this
between
is all
the
the
richest and the
trickle-down
poor.
theory.
No, this isn't trickle-down.
If everybody becomes richer, then they'll be all right in the long term.
That's right. And absolute poverty has declined massively
You tell that to the
1990.
sort of poor beggar in Africa or wherever.
The poor beggars have got less in India.
Yeah,
I mean, we are now in a ridiculous situation where we're sending money to India and they're sending up satellites. We can't afford the satellites. Well, These are absurd ideas.
There shouldn't be any beggars in India or indeed in this country because people are rich.
India's prosperity has increased
You
hugely.
clearly haven't been walking around Leicester Square to discover where the beggars really are.
Trickles down from the rich to the poor.
People are wealthier. People are wealthier today than they've ever been.
Well,
you know.
A lot of people are wealthier today. Of course they are, and therefore they should be prepared to be a bit more generous.
No, you can't impose generosity on people.
Well,
that is a dictatorship.
As a government, you can. And actually, I think the public are a lot more generous than you might think.
But then that's fine. Yeah. They can give money privately.
Well, they want to give money privately and through government.
Then they find they give it to these charities like Oxfam that are pretty disreputable and behave appallingly abroad. Well, some of the terrible things there.
There are all sorts of charities out there that do a brilliant job overseas. And we should contribute. People should contribute to those, but also they should be. The state should be keeping up and setting an example to the rest of the world about how much we can. 0.7% is a tiny fraction.
When I read that David Miliband is making $750,000 a year running a charity out of New York, I understand why he's gone into charity.
And funded pretty much by the poor old US taxpayer, at least not funded by us.
Anyway, charity are too high.
We're going to have to move on because after the messages from our sponsors, we're going to discuss whether trans women should be allowed to change with biological women in women-only changing rooms. That is the argument at the centre of a high-profile NHS employment tribunal. And the Metropolitan Police is in crisis again. Can police forces regain public trust and can judges be sensible?
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Plenty of cloud elsewhere across Europe, could also turn showery at times. These showers turning increasingly thundery as we head into Thursday for some. Largely dry across Madeira and Tenerife, though it could be breezy at times across the Canary Islands. But as we move our way further east, much more cloud, also some showers at times. These could start to turn thundery across parts of Croatia, Albania and also parts of Greece as we head into Thursday. So those showers continuing for some, drier elsewhere with the best of the temperatures across Tenerife.
All Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. As we go through the next 24 hours, there's going to be plenty of cloud for many of us, albeit with a touch of frost possible when we get some clearer skies towards the west. Most places, though, under that easterly flow, continuing to push in plenty of cloud and also bringing some outbreaks of mostly light drizzly rain. It will be in the east where these are most frequent. There could even be a bit of sleet, a bit of hill snow perhaps over the higher ground of northern England and into Scotland as well. Most places places, though, staying with the cloudy skies overnight, and that blanket of cloud will stop temperatures dropping a huge amount. But where we get those clearer skies in the west, we may see a touch of frost and perhaps even some fog or freezing fog patches. So in the southwest, there could be some clear breaks to start the day, and with that then some poor visibility issues, but these should gradually clear as we go through the day. A much cloudier story across many other parts, and with that there will be some drizzly rain, a bit damp in places too. Western Scotland perhaps having the best of the clear breaks overnight, and therefore the brightest start through tomorrow morning. With that though, a bit of frost around, and again some freezing fog patches quite possible. A cloudier story for more central eastern parts of Scotland. Through the day tomorrow, some of the cloud, particularly across eastern areas, is going to be pretty stubborn, so won't really clear, staying grey, and further outbreaks of drizzly rain quite likely. Otherwise, and further west, there should be perhaps a bit more brightness breaking through compared to today. With that, temperatures are likely to be a degree or so higher for many of us. Still a bit of a chilly feel, and if you're stuck under the cloud, it's going to feel even chillier still. As we look ahead to Thursday, and again, a bit more brightness developing, perhaps always most likely towards western parts. Eastern areas staying pretty grey, pretty murky. We do have some wet weather feeding in from the southwest, pushing into parts of Cornwall and also the Republic of Ireland. Otherwise, through the end of the week, it looks like it's going to stay largely cloudy for many of us, and also staying chilly. Bye-bye.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, we were talking about foreign aid and the mail mogs have arrived. Richard says, charity starts at home. If we have excess, fine, but we cease our foreign aid budget immediately and look after our own first. And Neil says, if we have given foreign aid to the same countries for the same projects for 30, 40 years, it is quite clear foreign aid doesn't work. Apart from emergency natural disaster relief, stop it all right now. I agree with you, actually, on both points. The Metropolitan Police faces a crisis after a landmark High Court ruling blocked the force from dismissing officers by revoking their vetting clearance. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, called the decision absurd, warning it leaves policing in a hopeless position. The case centred on Sergeant Lino de Maria, accused of rape and misconduct, though no charges were filed. His vetting was removed, but the court quashed that decision, saying dismissal via vetting withdrawal was unlawful. Sir Mark criticised this as undermining efforts to clean up the force after high-profile scandals, urging urgent government reform. The Home Office says changes are coming, but concerns remain that dangerous officers could stay on the force. How can the police regain public trust if the judges are getting in their way like this? Well, my panel is still with me. Michael, let me come to you on this. Justice must be done, must be seen to be done, and you've got to be fair to employees, and accusations are not proof of guilt. So this sergeant hasn't been found guilty of anything. On the other hand, vetting is not a legal standard, is not a criminal standard of proof exercise, and surely the police should have some flexibility in who they employ.
It seems very odd, this case. It's like sort of getting rid of somebody by revoking their pass to come in the building. I mean, why couldn't... I mean, an ordinary employer would drag the person in and say, well, we've heard these accusations. They would then examine them when the person would have representation, perhaps from their union, the Police Federation in this case, and that would then be gone through, and then they would decide whether or not to dismiss them. And then the employee could decide whether or not to go to an employment tribunal. That is the normal procedure. Why can't the Metropolitan Police use normal procedures rather than this method?
I think if you're a police officer, you're held to a higher standard than if you're working at Tesco's, to be honest. And that is the issue. And that is why they're going to have to put in a new law in to cover this position. And the person that will approve of this decision, by the way, is our current Prime Minister, because he is obsessed with law. And he will say, well, that judge is entirely correct. But somebody who suffers because this law has been viewed in this way, he will have no happy with it. I don't like the idea, the Met Police saying there will be more Wayne Couzens type officers after this ruling. I don't like using Wayne Couzens, who was a total vile, murderous freak within the police force. The police force is made of very, very good people. And what the current Metropolitan Commissioner, who doesn't get much of a thumbs up, by the way, in the senior hierarchy of the Met. They look upon him as a kind of HR guy, right? But, however, he is 100% right. They are held to a higher standard, and we want them to be held to a higher standard.
But I'm sure unemployment, if a case like this had gone through the kind of procedures it would do for any other employee, that the ultimate employment tribunal would appreciate that higher standard applies. But what you're arguing for is that the Metropolitan Police should be just allowed to sack anybody on the grounds of allegations that it receives or rumour. Surely got to be given the proper due process that any other employee would have. Well, and after all, the Metropolitan Police has been so badly run for the last 50 years, one way or another, in all sorts of appalling things gone on. Can we trust them? Can ordinary members of the force trust them to make these judgments? Shouldn't it have the same justice system as ordinary employment
I think they've
cases?
got a higher standard. It's harder to remove a policeman than it is to remove an ordinary
Well, partly because they've got a very strong trade union.
They've got a very strong trade union, that's right. And I just wonder, with the Labour government looking to increase more protections for employees, whether you'll actually get more of this. And you need to have a reasonable system for removing people, particularly from the police force, about whom you have doubts.
Well, if you can incorporate within the employment tribunal and all the previous processes system, which is quite complicated, and unfortunately it takes a long time to get to the employment tribunal because they've got such a backlog. But if you can incorporate within that some kind of understanding of what Kelvin's talking about, and you're talking about, the higher standard, that surely is the answer, rather than this backdoor method of vetting.
Supposing, for instance, we were in, I don't know, MI5 or MI6, you'd expect there to be a higher standard there. I feel uneasy about the police just being considered employment tribunal fodder, to be honest. I think that we have to view them as special people. And in viewing them as special people, I think they have got to be held to a higher account. And because of that, I am not happy at the idea of them just appearing in front of employment tribunals. I do understand clearly that the Police Federation is a massively powerful and kind of well organised. However, I rather like them. There was a disgusting case only last week. A police officer was finally cleared after nudging some kid off his bike, some scrote, right? And if it weren't for Police Federation money funding their lawyer, right, who actually tortured the kid in the witness box, right? I'm not sure that officer would have got off. He should never have been charged, by the way. But so it seems to me that the police can't win no matter what happens in these cases now. And I feel, but however, I do think that this law has got to be changed.
It's got to be looked at. All right, well, thank you very much to my panel. A high-profile employment tribunal, more employment law is underway after a female nurse claimed harassment for being forced to share a changing room with Dr. Beth Upton, a transgender NHS doctor, born male, but who now calls himself female. Dr. Upton, who was accused of causing discomfort among colleagues, told the tribunal, "I am biologically female," arguing that terms like biological sex have, quote, no agreed meaning in science. The doctor also suggests colleagues opposed to trans women in female spaces may hold, quote, bigoted views. Dr. Upton said it was agreed with a supervisor that the medic would use the female changing room after starting at the hospital in August 2023. The case has sparked debates on balancing respect for gender identity with the protection of women's spaces, as both sides share claims of harassment and trauma. Is the case against Dr. Upton fair? Well, I'm joined now by the co-director of For Women Scotland, Susan Smith. Thank you very much for joining me. shouldn't there be spaces that are reserved for what you might call genuine women?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the law very clearly says that there should be spaces reserved for women. There's the health and safety regulations at work say that there should be facilities for male and female. And of course, as soon as somebody like this doctor who identifies as the opposite sex goes into those spaces, they immediately become mixed-sex spaces. And we actually have some cases that have been going through. We've taken the Scottish Government to court on several occasions. We're awaiting a ruling from the Supreme Court. But the rulings that we have so far are very clear that provisions in favour of women exclude biological males and that they have no prima facie right to enter these spaces.
And the discussion on what is a biological woman, I mean, I'm no biologist, but there are chromosomes, aren't there? And that you can define whether somebody is male or female by their chromosomes, and that is the biological answer.
Yes, and I think a lot of activists try to obfuscate this. They say that there are a lot of definitions of sex. There's endocrinological sex, there's hormones, there's chromosomes, there's secondary characteristics and so on. But the simple fact of the matter is that in 99.98% of cases, those things all align perfectly, and that if you have XY chromosomes, you are likely to have testosterone and all the other attributes that go with being a male. So it's really nonsensical to pretend that there's any kind of spectrum here, which is what some people try to insist upon.
And if it's reasonably clear, therefore, there may be a tiny, tiny number of people for whom special provision should be made, but the vast bulk of people are making a choice if they say they belong to a different sex. They are volunteering to belong to that sex. And it's not necessarily the job of the state to accommodate that if it puts other groups at risk.
No, and even in those tiny medical anomalies, it's usually a different development that belongs to one sex or the other. So we do tend to say that those people remain male or female. What this is about is people who have a gender identity which is different to their sex, and they are also protected under law, and it would be possible to provide alternative provisions for someone if they were to ask at work in the NHS. I'm sure they would be able to provide them with alternative changing facilities if they really felt that they were unable to change in front of their colleagues of their own sex. But one thing that's really important to bear in mind, which I think gets lost in this, is that someone like the NHS, you have to take off practically all of your clothes, and you're not allowed to do that before you get into work. You have to do it in your place of work. So it's really important for the dignity and privacy of everyone that they are able to access spaces that are appropriate to them.
Indeed, that's a very good point. Thank you very much, Susan. After the break, a controversial change to the UK's assisted suicide bill proposes replacing High Court judges with a panel of experts to approve cases. Are we on the slippery slope before the bill has even passed?
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, joining us in the studio now is Chia Eaglin and Erin Cobb from Clark's Farm Greyhound Rescue, who have brought along two very special guests. This is Duchess.
So Duchess is the one I'm stroking. This is Duchess, isn't it? Our lady joining us this morning, and then over there is Vieira.
Vieira's a chap, isn't he? And Duchess is a lady. So,
talk to us about their history. Now, they used to be racing dogs, didn't they? But now they're looking for a home.
Yeah, so both of these dogs were racing greyhounds. They have retired recently. So now we are getting them ready and prepared to go into a forever home, essentially.
So anyone watching, make sure you get on the Clark's Farm website later on today, because these guys are up for adoption. And I mean,
and they are very cute.
Look how well behaved they are as well. They were a little bit excited when they came in because it's their first time on TV, and they wanted to make a good impression.
They did.
Now
they're both looking, aren't they? They know what's up on
yawning already.
Here. Now, talk to us about greyhounds as a breed. If anyone was going to adopt a greyhound, what would they expect?
I'd say the first thing is couch potatoes. They are the most lazy dog ever.
Really? You wouldn't expect that because of the background?
Everyone has this massive misconception that they need loads of exercise, loads of walks, but they are actually, you know, quite happy with 2 20-minute walks a day. They are
Really?
so laid back.
Yeah. Easy.
That's
as long as they're able to have their moments of madness, zoomies, you know, they do get the sillies, of course. But once they've had that, they are so happy to just chill out on the sofa with you. Usually,
they've all got different personalities, and it's just great to see. Even though some of them,
Duchess just perched on the back of your head.
Duchess is going to fall asleep. You're on TV, Duchess.
She's watching.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Well, we were talking about the Metropolitan Police, and we've had a mail mog from Neil, who says, for once, Michael Crick is right. The police can set the bar wherever they can legally justify it, but they need to demonstrate that the person they wish to dismiss has failed to meet it. They can't just dismiss on allegations alone. The individual needs to be proved guilty of something, and in this case, the charges against the individual were dismissed. That's a very fair point. Well, the proposed change to the UK's assisted suicide bill is reopening further debate after Labour MP Kim Ledbetter defended plans to remove the need for a High Court judge to approve cases. Instead, a 3-member panel chaired by a retired judge or King's Counsel alongside a psychiatrist and social worker would assess cases. Ms Ledbetter argued this system strengthens safeguards, calling it a judge-plus approach. Critics claim safeguards are being watered down with concerns about risks to vulnerable individuals. Despite her repeated assurances that her assisted suicide bill would be the world's strictest, Ms Ledbetter has been forced to abandon its flagship safeguard, a requirement for High Court judges personally to sign off in every case. Many MPs say the safeguard is what convinced them to support the bill at its second reading. Can such a panel ever offer true protection for the vulnerable, or are we edging ever closer to normalising state-sanctioned death? Well, I'm joined now by the Chief Executive of Humanists UK, Andrew Copson. Andrew, thank you very much for joining me this evening. I've been looking up what Ms Ledbetter said in the second reading debate, and she was saying that having a High Court judge would give the UK the best protection of any country in the world. Now she's got rid of it. Doesn't it mean the protections are being watered down before the bill is even passed?
I don't think so. I mean, if we have a third tier of approval, whether judicial or otherwise, in the law in England and Wales in assisted dying, it will still be the strictest law in the world. There are no other jurisdictions of the over 20 jurisdictions in the world that now have assisted dying that even have a third tier of oversight, whether it's the High Court or whether it's some sort of tribunal. Only Spain has anything like that in a tribunal that it has. So our law, if it goes through, even if it goes through amended with a different type of third tier protection, will still be the law in the world that has the most safeguards. And there have been, what's changed since the words you read out from second reading, of course, is that the committee's taken evidence. And they've taken evidence from a lot of judges who've said the High Court element doesn't work, it's not workable. If you want a third tier of scrutiny, you'll have to try something else. I think that's what Parliament's now going to do.
That's quite something to say, because Ms Ledbetter said in her speech, having consulted at the highest levels in the judiciary and the medical profession, I know that they can and will fulfil those safeguarding responsibilities and that they have the expertise to do so. Are you saying she was misleading the House when she gave that commitment at the second reading debate?
I don't think we need to think that she was misleading them. I think we have to trust that she was speaking in good faith and believed what she was saying at the time. And then, like all rational people, she listened to the evidence that was brought before the committee and changed her mind. That's what people do. Shouldn't she have done her homework before she brought forward such an important bill? If what you're saying now is that what was in the bill to begin with is unrealistic, then what you're saying is that the primary safeguard wasn't properly thought through before the bill was presented to Parliament. That's pretty shoddy, isn't it? I disagree with you in two respects. First of all, I don't think that judicial oversight is the primary safeguard. Many safeguards will have accumulated before even the third tier, if there is a third tier of decision-making, is enacted. And secondly, I don't think that you need to accuse someone of being shoddy to accept that with colleagues, as the House of Commons does its job and looks into the issues that are raised and examines the evidence, someone can't change their mind. Of course they can change their mind. You're not shoddy just because you change your mind.
Well, you are shoddy if you make a commitment that then it turns out is wrong, which is what you're saying the evidence has established. It's careless not to have thought that through. But it also seems to me that this is the fundamental risk with assisted suicide, is that you start with very tight restrictions and gradually they get eroded. And what's happening here is that the restriction is being eroded even before the bill is passed.
No, there's no evidence from anywhere in the world that that does happen. And if you think about how long campaigners like me have been arguing for an assisted dying law in the UK, I think it's hard to argue that it's a slippery slope. It's been a long, hard slog uphill from my point of view. And I think that it will continue to be so, even if there is expansion of this law in the future, which would then have to go through Parliament. I think proper scrutiny and examination of
just out of interest, because we're about to finish, are you in favour of capital punishment?
I'm not in favour of capital punishment.
So you're against killing the guilty, but you're in favour of killing the innocent?
The material difference in my worldview is choice.
All right. Thank you very much, Andrew. Up next, it's Patrick Christie's. Patrick, what's on your programme this evening?
Well, I've got a big exclusive for you and our viewers and our listeners, Jacob. Radical Islamic preachers are on their way to Britain. They are set to be doing a speaking tour. One of them is already banned from continental Europe. They say things like Muslims should hate non-Muslims. They discuss the best way to stone someone to death, amongst other things. So I'm going to be talking about all of that and asking the question whether or not we should ban them from entering Britain, frankly. We talk about that. Also, Chelsea footballer Sam Kerr has got away with calling a police officer stupid and white. Is that two-tier justice? Would you not expect to be done for some kind of racially aggravated offence if you decided to flip that on its head and call a police officer, say, stupid and black? Not that, of course, any of us ever would. All of that and much more, Jacob.
Well, it's one of the virtues of our jury system. It comes up with unexpected decisions from time to time. Thank you, Patrick. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg. As you know, I'll be back next week. The weather in Somerset is beautiful. And I meant to say yesterday to Arthur and Lucy, whose mother I met on the farmers' protest, that the weather in Castle Carey will be particularly good. Extra sunshine for Castle Carey.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Here's your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. As we go through the next 24 hours, there's going to be plenty of cloud for many of us, albeit with a touch of frost possible when we get some clearer skies towards the west. Most places, though, under that easterly flow, continuing to push in plenty of cloud and also bringing some outbreaks of mostly light drizzly rain. It will be in the east where these are most frequent. There could even be a bit of sleet, a bit of hill snow perhaps, over the higher ground of northern England and into Scotland as well. Most places, though, staying with the cloudy skies overnight, and that blanket of cloud will stop temperatures dropping a huge amount. But where we get those clearer skies in the west, we may see a touch of frost. frost and perhaps even some fog or freezing fog patches. So in the southwest, there could be some clear breaks to start the day, and with that then some poor visibility issues, but these should gradually clear as we go through the day. A much cloudier story across many other parts, and with that there will be some drizzly rain, a bit damp in places too. Western Scotland perhaps having the best of the clear breaks overnight, and therefore the brightest start through tomorrow morning. With that though, a bit of frost around and again some freezing fog patches quite possible. A cloudier story for more central eastern parts of Scotland. Through the day tomorrow, some of the cloud, particularly across eastern areas, is going to be pretty stubborn, so won't really clear, staying grey, and further outbreaks of drizzly rain quite likely. Otherwise, and further west, there should be perhaps a bit more brightness breaking through compared to today. With that, temperatures are likely to be a degree or so higher for many of us. Still a bit of a chilly feel, and if you're stuck under the cloud, it's going to feel even chillier still. As we look ahead to Thursday, and again, a bit more brightness developing, perhaps always most likely towards western parts. Eastern areas staying pretty grey, pretty murky. We do have some wet weather feeding in from the southwest, pushing into parts of Cornwall and also the Republic of Ireland. Otherwise, through the end of the week, it looks like it's going to stay largely cloudy for many of us and also staying chilly. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're doubling your chances to win in our latest Great British giveaway, with 2 fabulous prize bundles up for grabs. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. And the best news is, 2 lucky winners are going to win. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring